Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we help you unlock your potential freedom through land investing, real estate investing, and entrepreneurship. Hey everyone, this is episode 97 of the Real Estate Investing Podcast, discussing cash flowing from land. I'm your host, Daniel Apke, joined again by my brother and business partner, Ron Apke. Before we get into the show, let's go over a question from one of our featured members in our Discord community. I'd love to hear your thoughts on best practices for dealing with a waterfront property. I'm mailing to Wisconsin counties currently and have had to explain to many callers about their offer is 5% of what the property is worth because their property is on a waterfront. I have a line about calling for an updated offer if this property has waterfront access in my letter, but people don't seem to be getting the idea.
This is it's difficult because you need to figure out a way to price the waterfront land differently, or you need to find a way to get them on the phone. And it's really, really difficult to acquire waterfront properties for this reason. A lot of times sellers are gonna know the value of their waterfront property. So buying it at 40% can be very, very difficult. What you can try to do is look, and this is going to get pretty technical for this, but hopefully this is helpful. What you can try to do is pull off the APN. So APNs in all areas will have a certain scheme. So if you can find out what APN scheme are waterfront or very close to waterfront, you can price those differently. I've tried to do that before. It's very, very time consuming and it hasn't yielded deals. I haven't done it for a ton of counties, but we don't get a ton of waterfront properties. It is very difficult. I do like your mindset going after that stuff, but it's like I said over and over, I think it's a difficult thing to do to acquire them.
Yeah, and a big part of it, Ron, is just the shape of lakes and water is not consistent. If it's not like it's a straight square and you can just longitude, latitude it, you actually kind of have to manually go in there and segment areas off. So it creates a pretty significant obstacle and just very time consuming. If you can find a way to do it effectively, there's a ton of money in waterfront properties. So there's definitely ways to make money, Ron. But other than that, let's get into the show. Cash flowing from land. Everyone hears we're land flipping, Ron. We're just buying and selling land, but there's a way to cash flow as well if you want. What are some different ways to cash flow from land?
Yeah, for sure. It's not something we currently do. It's something we've looked into quite a bit. So there's quite a few different ways, and some people make a load of money cash flowing from land. So a couple of ways is owner financing. So it's essentially buying things under market and then selling things on terms, just like a bank does essentially with a house. They're going to loan you, like you buy something, you take a 20% down payment, and then they pay you $300 a month for 5, 10 years, whatever it is. That is a very efficient way and effective way. We're going to go into that a little more because owner financing is such a big thing in this industry. But going on to the other things, farmland, you can rent out farmland. You can rent out rec land, so hunting land. People get hunting. What are they called? Hunting contracts, Daniel. People rent out for the year, rent out for a season, where you can get cash flow from land. And then you also have timber. So some people will literally keep land 30, 40 years. They'll cut the timber every 10, 15 years if it's good timber, and then they'll just let it regrow. And usually it happens naturally where it's just going to regrow. Then you do it again 10, 15, whatever years ago. I don't know a ton on this, but the people who are specialized in timber, I mean, they pay for the land after the first time they get the timber off it. I feel like sometimes, Dan.
Did you mention agriculture, Ron?
Yeah, I mentioned farmland. I said farmland.
Oh, farmland's what you said. Okay. Yeah, that's I'd say the biggest one for in our industry. What we see, number one, is the owner financing. So selling the property with we'll get into that more, but selling the property with the down payment and then them paying it off monthly to you, just as you're acting as the bank. And let's get into that here in a minute, Ron. But the other three that you mentioned, hunting, timber, and agricultural, their hunting properties are cheap, but there are ways you can have a 50 people paying you for a 50-acre tract, and each one of them has the rights to hunt on it, and you can do different things like that. It's not just typically not just giving it to one person. So you might see like throwing $300 a year or something for hunting access to 200 acres, but they might have 200 other people doing that, and you might have to reserve it. There's different things you can do with hunting land, and the nicer you make the property, Ron, the more attributes on it, the more big deer on it, whatever hunting is on it. Maybe you have a port for them to plug their RVs or trailers into, whatever that is. Like you start making these improvements, making the land nice, getting good game on there, you can charge a lot of money. People spend a boatload of money. There's a reason why Cabela's and all the other hunting brands out there, Ron, are thriving. It is just a massive, massive industry. And then in terms of timber, that's a cycle because you obviously have to timber it every 20 years. You make your money and have to wait, right? So that's a longer cycle. You can make a lot of money. You get rid of the timber, it gets rid of a lot of the asset. So your property typically becomes less after that. So that's kind of a trade off there, Ron. And then the agricultural, I love that option. You can make good money. People pay. It's farmland. You get a lot of owner pride from farmers as well. So they take care of the land. They're paying you monthly. They're usually on time. It's their business. They're profiting as it. They're looking at it as their business. So it's not like when you rent a residential property, Ron. It's a little bit different. These people look at it like their business. It's business to business relationships from that.
One more thing as you were talking, Dan, you can look at this and there's so many things and we can't get into everything, guys. It's just this will be a 3 hour podcast if we get into everything into detail. But you can also do short-term things. Like there is a lot of demand right now for like camping sites. Dan and I just purchased 40 acres and we're talking about camping there. We haven't gone there yet to camp, but camping, you can make a ton of money. If you make something nice, like what do they call it? Glamping? Is that what they call it, Dan?
You can do glamping, or you can just carve out a little spot, put some gravel on it, put a fire pit, and charge $20 a night.
Yeah, but if you get like a storage container or something like that that isn't overly costly, that's obviously adding a lot more value to the land. And then you almost treat it like it's an Airbnb, a short-term rental. People who are traveling are going to stop there, stuff like that. It has to be in the right location, but I mean, you can make a ton of money doing stuff like that, being creative with the land. It's hard to say exactly, but it matters where the land is based on what you can really do with it.
Yeah, and it's obviously seasonal too. People, if you're in, let's say Kentucky, for instance, because you just said that, if you're in Kentucky and it's December, you're not going to have a lot of people camping. So what are you going to do in the winter months? You're just going to take a loss, or you're going to find something else to do with it. But there's so much you can do with land. I remember I drove from Florida to Ohio once. I was looking for places to camp in Georgia or Tennessee, Kentucky, and northern Georgia, just kind of a halfway spot. And I couldn't find it. This was, I think, July, and I couldn't find anywhere to camp, Ron. Well, I was calling around everywhere, private campgrounds, state campgrounds, they all are booked. And it's probably something to do with a COVID spike because camping really went up. People have camping gear now. More people are camping than ever, I'd imagine. But there's just so much you can do. And that got me thinking that I want to own 100 acres, make it really nice, give people like a little creek waterfront to camp on, charge more for those, give RV ports to plug in, and then bathrooms. And you can charge RV people $50 a night, camping people with this literally just gravel and a place to cook and a fire pit, which is 20, $30 a night.
Yeah, I had. Oh, did you know, Dan? I don't know if you knew this. Speaking of Kentucky, they just released 15,000 elk to kind of increase the value of land in eastern Kentucky. They literally they released 15,000 elk into the wild to increase and people are coming from all over the country right now to eastern Kentucky because of this to hunt because they just literally released 15,000 elk and it's just growing so much and growing the game.
That's crazy. I did not know that. Wow. So there's elk on our property now.
Yeah, hopefully. But yeah, let's get into the next part of the show, Dan.
Owner financing. Yeah. So let's talk about, we'll go into that more. What is owner financing, Ron? How does it work? Just go into the basics.
Yeah, for sure. So what owner financing is, one of the keys to it, and some people think like you can go on Zillow and you can and make a little bit of money, but the main key to owner financing is still buying something at a extremely reduced price. So maybe it's worth $10,000, $12,000, you buy it for $3,000. So you get this under contract for $3,000, you buy it for $3,000. You have a couple choices: flip it, sell it for $10,000, $12,000, whatever it is, or take a down payment, $3,000. You can get off. Ideally, you pay for your entire purchase price with that down payment. So you get a $3,000 down payment, and then someone's going to pay you over the next 5, 7 years $200. The tricky part that we'll get into, or that I'll start touching base on right now, is you essentially have a tenant now who, if they don't pay you, you have issues. Like it's not as easy as just like telling them like you can't go on the land anymore. But there is a way where you can eventually reclaim the land or whatever and get that note because they're not paying the note off based on your terms. So then you just own the land again. You got that $3,000. You can pocket that $3,000 plus the 200 or whatever you're getting monthly, and now you can resell it again. But the thing is, eventually someone's going to pay for that entire piece of land over 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is, and they're going to own the land, and then you're not going to have that quote unquote cash flowing asset anymore.
Right. So it just extends it out five. I see a lot of 5, 6 years, 8 years, 4 years, whatever it is. And I think that's where it becomes, especially in down. We're going to have an episode on the recession and selling land in a recession. But I feel like this is something you can really utilize when people don't have as much capital or don't want to spend as much money on land, because traditionally land's hard to get loans for. So people like to pay with cash. We see a ton of cash offers. A lot of ours are cash offers that we're accepting. But as the market kind of goes down, this is an alternative way to capture money. And the way we buy things, Ron, say we have a $90,000 property retail value, we bought it for 30 grand or so, or 35, 40 grand. And we're taking 30% down payment of that 90,000, say we're taking 30%. We're capturing what we put into it. And then the rest is all profit. So it's really mitigating a lot of risk. And then on top of it, if they do stop paying their loan, you can go through that note, reclaim the note, and then have the property back and keep that $30,000, which isn't really a sustainable business model, relying on people to foreclose. But that's kind of what you're doing here. Is that's going to happen. You're just going to be running pretty much a rental company at this point, just a collection agency, just constantly collecting money. You're going to have people late on payments. You're going to have a whole system, QuickBooks or whatever you're using to capturing those payments. You have to hire someone to keep track of all that. It adds a lot of operations to this business, but there are a lot of benefits doing it.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you get $15,000 or whatever over 6 years, or you get $12,000 right now. For our business model, we prefer the $12,000, $10,000 right now because we don't want to be a collections agency. It's very difficult to, it sounds easy collecting $200 every month, but when people start not paying, like there is a whole separate side of the business right now. So our biggest thing is we cash flow by flipping the land. Essentially, we're not actually cash flowing on the monthly basis, how like rental properties are cash flowing or how you would be cash flowing with owner financing. But it's a whole separate. A lot of people listening, Daniel, are gonna listen to this and like get really excited. Like I can do this with a lot of land, and you really can. But it is a whole nother business. There are a ton of headaches that you don't expect right now that are going to come up, and it can become very, very difficult to run that type of business. It's a lot more hands on business. You're going to have more employees for the amount of profit you're doing. And I'm not pushing you away from that, but I just want to make you guys aware of what you're going to run into.
Oh, no doubt, Ron. In today's market where you can sell things fairly easily still for around market value fairly quickly, it's really not an option in my head personally, because I would take that in that situation I was talking about. We bought it for 30. I'd take that 90,000, or say it's worth 90. I'd take 80,000 over taking 100,000 in whatever 5, 6 years. That money's worth way more right now. We can put it back to use. We have other things we can buy, we have fun deals that we can fund. There's just so many things to put your money in, and so many. And the land industry is expanding around. There's just so much land out there that we can buy. If we had unlimited money, it's crazy what you can do. So a lot of this business model, what we're doing is turning your money fast, and that's kind of what we preach. Let's turn our money fast, put it back to work, because your money. This is inventory. You need to look at it like that. We want to turn it as fast as possible and get that money back to work as fast as possible. It's about turning your inventory.
Yeah, and we had a 30-day challenge. So someone who took our course for the 30-day challenge, get your first deal in 30 days, and they joined this program with $3,000, $4,000. I think they sent probably 5,000 mailers, and they got a property I think for $8,000. And they were asking me like, I could do owner financing on this, sell it for 22. I'm like, listen, this is worth 35 right now. Or sell it. He said he could sell it for like 27 over 5 years. I said, listen, this is worth 22, 23 right now. Get your cash out and then do it again. So you turn that $8,000 into $23,000 really fast. That was like day 26 of the 30-day challenge when he got that deal. And I think he's already flipped the property for like 22 or $23,000. So he made 15,000 opposed to making 19,000 over 5 years, Dan. And I think it becomes like, it's just an obvious decision in my mind.
Especially at first, Ron. I mean, if he's in the 30-day challenge, that probably means he has a 9 to 5 job. And he's doing this 30-day challenge is designed to get your first deal in 30 days, just like the name says. But if you need to turn your money at first, like you have mail to pay for, you have other things to pay for and expenses and a business to operate, you want that cash coming back. Oh, great. I bought it for 8K. I can get whatever, $19,000 over the next 5 years. or I can profit whatever 22 minus 8 is, which is easy, $14,000, and put that $14,000 right back into the business. And then there you go. All your mail is paid for 6 months, Ron.
Exactly. And let's get into. I still want to keep the track on scaling this, or not scaling this, cash flowing, because there are advantages in this. What about like what do you think, Daniel, in terms of scaling this? Because some people and a lot of people do talk about making whatever $5,000, $10,000 a month with cash flowing land, with owner financing, whatever it is. What do you think like your operations need to be to really scale this? You can't do $1 million in cash flow a year without 50 employees. I feel like I don't know. $1 million of cash flow is like you're doing a ton. These are sorry, Dan.
Of
These
cash
are
flow from owner financing in the ways you're
exactly
talking.
your payments are 100 to 299 max in these. These are people to give you guys I'm gonna before we get into scaling to give you guys an idea of who wants to be on these notes. It is people who cannot get bank financing. This is 450 credit score people. Typically, I'm not saying 100%, but if they have the down payment, why not just go to a bank and get a 8%, 7% loan instead of getting a 12% loan with owner financing? These people do not have the credit to get loans from banks more times than not. Why should we be giving them that? But let's get into the scaling part, Dan, and what kind of operations you need.
That's a really good point that we didn't bring up, Ron. Yeah, these are not qualified people to get loans. So you're dealing with that. Think of Section 8 housing, for instance. You're going to have to go knocking on the door for payments. This it's just like it's low credit, high risk. That's the people you're dealing with traditionally with this. And there are also people with very little cash because they can't pay it in cash, so they don't have too much cash to put down on this. But yeah, so let's get into scaling this. Since we don't do it a lot, I don't really know what's involved in scaling, but everything that we do, I want to make sure we can scale it. So if we are going to bring a new business venture to us, Ron, we want to make sure we can scale that business. I think for this, you have to have systems in place. This can get so messy so fast. I already see it, Ron. You got to think like if you have 1,000 payments a month or so, or that's a high scale, say 100. 100's low though, because these add up over 5 years. Like that's only
Yeah,
10.
a hundred's gonna yield $15,000 a month maybe in cash flow, which isn't terrible. I say average $150 payments, something like that. But yeah, if you're trying to do like half $1 million in cash flow, your expenses are going to be absolutely crazy with payment processing. And I feel like I want to get into the positive is like you have a real cash flowing business and all of this, but you're going to eventually have to deed the property over. There's the acquisition side is the exact same of what we are doing right now. You need to acquire properties under market value. And if you become really good at acquiring properties from $2,000 to $5,000 and they're worth $12,000 to $15,000, you can do this. Like you really can. But the scaling part is going to be with the right people. You're going to need some really good people under you, collection types of people, and then the systems, Dan.
Yeah, and honestly, like if they don't pay, great, you recapture it and keep your down payment. That's the beautiful thing of I think that's like the biggest pro in my mind, Ron, is just if they don't pay, oh, see you later. You haven't paid for 60 days. Great. I'm not going to keep coming after you. I'm going to just take that, take it to whatever you need to do to reclaim it and then put it back up and get another down payment. But that's a lot of work. You got to go and you got to file whatever. It depends on the state, I'm sure. You got to file for it and then you got to repost it and sell it again and do the whole thing over again. It's just a lot of operational work. And you think like, if I want to do this, I would want to have over 1,000 different payments every month, Ron. Cause I think over 5 years, think of that though, like a thousand divided by 12 months divided by 5 years is just 16 properties a year. So yeah, maybe that's a lot, or a month, 16 properties a month. So yeah, maybe that's a lot, but if it's 10 properties a month and it's 700 or so, so if you're doing 10 properties a month, you'll have 700 properties under contract that you're collecting payments on within 5 years.
Yeah, then you you got to figure out the acquisition side too. And that's the thing with this is you can never this isn't like rental properties where you get, I don't know, $100,000 of free cash flow a month or something like that and then you can just stop. This isn't like that because you're going to eventually not own the properties. It's not going to happen every time on every property because some people are going to default and then you're going to get the land back. But eventually your inventory is going to run out if you don't keep acquiring. So that's kind of every side of the business. So you basically have the acquisition side of the business. you have the collection side, you have the collection side of the business, and then you have the selling side of the business, because you still need to market and sell the properties. You still obviously need to acquire the properties. And then you have this added collection side, essentially, Dan.
Now let's start with Ron. I want to get into cash flowing from land versus rental properties. And while we talk about this, I want to focus on not owner financing, because owner financing and rental properties are so much different. Let's just talk about cash flowing from land, from like a farmland or hunting property, stuff like that, Ron.
Yeah, I think farmland has some comparable things to rental properties. Appreciation, you're going to always, land is always going to appreciate, not always every year, but for the most part, it is going to appreciate on a year to year basis. And over 20 years, the value of land is always going to go up. So you get that in a rental property, you get that in land. With land, you're going to have less property taxes than rental properties. So if you do not, let's say you have a piece, 20 acres of farmland or something that you're leasing out, if that lease, if that tenant or whatever lease, whatever you want to call it, you don't have an active lease on it, it's not going to cost you too much money, because more times than not, you probably already own the land outright versus a rental property where you have a mortgage and then you have higher property taxes. If you lose a tenant, not saying the first month you're going to be screwed and like go under or be foreclosed on, but if you lose a tenant and don't have a tenant in your rental property and for 6 months, 8 months, all your cash flow is gone. All of your like your buildup of your cash over the last year or 2 years of having tenants is probably going to be gone from having a vacant place for however long. So I don't think there's a ton as far as the benefits, Daniel. I'm trying to get into like, I would prefer a rental property over a piece of farmland personally. Like I'd prefer a fourplex or something like that over 20 acres of farmland that I'm leasing out. I just think long term it's better.
I agree. It diversifies you. That's one of the main, because a lot of people don't own farmland. It is very safe. You get good appreciation on average, very good appreciation, which rental properties get good appreciation too if you do it right. So there's not really an advantage of that side, but it is very safe. I think farmland is personally safer than a rental property. That's just my opinion. Another thing though, Ron, you said so there's low tax. So they're very low cost to maintain, right? You do not, like Ron said, you do not need anyone farming that land actively paying you for you to make money. You are going to make money off appreciation, even if you're paying the tax. Taxes for rental properties, if, like Ron said, if there's no one in it, you're going to be paying more tax than the appreciation typically. The tax is going to be costing you more, whatever it is, 3% or whatever state, county, everything you're in. You're going to be paying more for tax than you are for getting appreciation. That's vice versa for farmland. But there are a lot of tax incentives for people who own farmland. So if you go to the right areas and do the right things, you can gain a lot of tax incentives. The government like farm owners. They really do. And they are positioned in a place to where it's very friendly to own farmland. So it's not hard to own it. They make it easy on the owners, and they give you good tax incentives as well.
Yeah, they do love people farming land and you're creating food off of land or yielding things off of land, which is definitely beneficial for the government. It's beneficial for really the economy, everything as a whole. These little farms are very, very helpful for our economy. So yeah, I think we got into that pretty well, Dan. Rental properties, obviously, you're going to have to fix toilets. You're going to have to do all this other crap that you're not going to have to do with a vacant piece of land. And like you said earlier, Dan, these farmers who are leasing your land it's a pride thing. Like it's not the same as like a tenant who I don't know, destroys your apartment. Like a farmer is not going to destroy your piece of land. Like they take pride in it. It's their business. Like you said, they're trying to obviously make money off it as well. So there's not that many similarities. Like you said, I think diversifying is really important, and owning a 40, 50 acre piece of farmland definitely is doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have much more to say. Let's conclude it from there, Ron. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. To get started and to unlock your potential freedom, visit landinvestingonline.com to join our free Discord where Ron and I and other tons of successful investors are involved. If you guys are here listening on Apple Podcast, please like and review our podcast. It means a lot and it helps grow this business and move us forward. Other than that, thank you for joining, and we'll see you next episode.
Thanks, guys.